On a hot July weekend in 2015, a young woman named Lauren Agee went to a lake festival with 3 friends. She was a bright and energetic 21-year-old criminal justice student, full of life and dreams for her future. She lived at home with her mom, who she was incredibly close to, and she was in a happy relationship. The festival was called Wakefest, an annual wakeboarding competition on Center Hill Lake in Tennessee. It was supposed to be a fun, carefree weekend away. Lauren went with her childhood friend Hannah Palmer, Hannah's boyfriend Aaron Lilly, and a man named Chris Stout, who was a friend of Aaron's. Lauren had never met Chris before that Friday. Her mom, Sherry, felt a deep sense of unease about the trip. She wasn't a fan of Hannah, feeling the girl only used Lauren as a friend when it was convenient. As Lauren left, Sherry hugged her extra tight, told her she loved her, and made her promise to be careful. Lauren told her mom they had rented a cabin for the weekend. The group spent the first day of the festival like any other young people would. They drank, they watched the wakeboarding competitions, they laughed and took pictures. Lauren even tried some cliff jumping, a common activity at the lake. During one jump, she hit her head on a rock. It gave her a minor concussion, but she shook it off and kept going. The pictures she posted online showed her smiling, seemingly having the time of her life. But the reality of her sleeping arrangements was far different from what she had told her mother. There was no cabin. The place they were staying was a remote, rugged cliffside area known as Hog's Cove. It was not part of the official festival grounds. To get there, you had to paddle a canoe across a dark cove, then use a thick rope to pull yourself up a steep, rocky, and snake-infested incline. At the top, the ground was narrow. On one side was a 35-foot drop to the water. On the other, where they planned to sleep, was a sheer 90-foot cliff falling straight down into the deep lake below. It was a perilous location, not a cozy cabin. As Saturday night turned into Sunday morning, the scene at the crowded marina bar began to wind down. Around 2 a.m., an off-duty police officer working security for the festival, Chris Yarchuk, saw Lauren and her 3 friends leaving. He watched the group walk to the end of the dock, get into a small aluminum canoe, and begin paddling into the dark toward the outline of the cliff across the water. The group reached the base of the cliff and began the difficult climb. Lauren's own cell phone, left recording, captured a friend's voice in the dark uttering a chilling remark, "We're going into a death trap." It was a prophetic statement. At the top, the setup was bare and exposed. There was one small tent intended for Hannah and Aaron. For Lauren and the stranger, Chris Stout, there was only a hammock. It was tied tightly between 2 trees, and its edge sat just feet from the brink of the 90-foot drop. There were no guardrails, no safety measures. If you rolled out of that hammock the wrong way, you would fall a long, long way down. Sunday, July 26th dawned on Center Hill Lake. At the campsite on the cliff, according to the statements Hannah, Aaron, and Chris would later give, they woke up to find Lauren missing. Hannah said she shook Chris Stout awake to ask where Lauren was. Chris reportedly said that Lauren had gotten up a while earlier, but he didn't feel her leave. He said she had mentioned something about meeting someone. Hannah told investigators this is why they weren't immediately alarmed. They assumed Lauren, being social, had simply gone off with new friends she'd met at the festival. They did not call her phone, they did not shout for her along the cliff, they did not report her missing to festival security or law enforcement. Instead, they gathered their things and left the campsite themselves, using the canoe to return to the main festival area. They spent the day at Wakefest. At no point did any of them reach out to Lauren's mother, Sherry, who was now frantically calling her daughter's cell phone, receiving no answer. Back at the lake that afternoon, around 4:20 p.m., a man named Lynn Blair was fishing with his son when he spotted something unsettling in the water. As he steered his boat closer, the shape became horrifyingly clear. It was a body, floating face down. He saw bright pink shorts. He immediately called for help. The discovery triggered a response from local authorities and the festival security team. Off-duty Sergeant Ryan Mellinson was among those who responded on a pontoon boat. As they approached the body, another small boat came paddling towards them. It was Aaron Lilly and Chris Stout in their canoe. They called out, asking if that was their friend in the water, explaining that she had been missing. Sergeant Melanson found this profoundly odd. They had not reported a missing person, yet upon seeing a body recovery from the lake, their first assumption was that it must be their friend. Their behavior on the scene struck him as strange. He described them as nervous and lacking the emotional reaction one would expect. Meanwhile, miles away, the knock every parent dreads finally came for Sherry. A police officer arrived at her home, stating there had been an accident at the lake and she needed to come to the hospital immediately. Her mind racing with panic, she and her husband drove as fast as they could, clinging to a fragile hope that it was just an injury.
So the scene at the hospital was a blur of cold, sterile hallways and unbearable waiting. For Sherry Smith, the minutes felt like hours. Finally, they were led into a private room and given the devastating news. Her Lauren was gone. The initial explanation from a DeKalb County detective was that Lauren had died from a cliff-jumping accident. Sherry's mind, even through the shock, began firing questions. Where were her friends? Why hadn't anyone called her? How could this have happened? The detective indicated the three friends were being questioned. The official investigation led by the sheriff's department moved quickly. They took statements from Hannah, Aaron, and Chris, who repeated their story of a night of heavy drinking and Lauren wandering off. Investigators visited the cliffside campsite. They reported seeing no obvious signs of a struggle, no blood, nothing to suggest foul play. The medical examiner's initial findings noted Lauren's blood alcohol level was high. Based on the friend's account and the treacherous location, the pieces seemed to fit a tragic, if reckless, accident. The theory presented to the family was that Lauren, intoxicated and possibly disoriented from her earlier head injury, had rolled out of a hammock in the middle of the night. She had fallen down the cliff, hitting rocks, and then rolled into the lake where she drowned. Within days, the DeKalb County Sheriff's Department ruled the death an accident. The official cause was listed as blunt force trauma from a fall and then drowning. The case was closed. For the authorities, it was a straightforward, if sad, conclusion. But for Sherry, the closure they offered felt like a door slammed shut on the truth. Nothing about her daughter's final hours, as described by her friends, sounded like the Lauren she knew. The very next day, while Sherry was engulfed in grief, she was confronted with a sight that stole her breath. On social media, Chris Stout had posted a photo. It showed Hannah, Aaron, and himself smiling on a boat. The caption, posted on July 27th, read, "Best weekend ever." It was later edited, but the screenshot existed. That image, more than any official report, convinced Sherry that the story of a simple, tragic accident was a lie. It showed a chilling lack of remorse or sadness from the people who were last with her daughter. That post became a symbol of everything that was wrong with the official story. Driven by a mother's intuition and a mountain of unanswered questions, Sherry Smith refused to accept the accidental ruling. She began her own quest for answers, which led her to hire a private investigator named Sheila Wasaki. Wasaki was not a typical investigator. She was a former stay-at-home mom who had become a PI after helping solve her own college roommate's murder. She approached Lauren's case with fresh eyes and a deep skepticism of the official report. Her first step was to obtain and meticulously examine every piece of evidence, especially the full autopsy report and photographs that the family had never properly seen. What she found was a series of medical facts that directly contradicted the accidental fall and drown theory. The most critical finding was in the toxicology and pathology reports. There was no water in Lauren's lungs. In medical terms, there was no evidence of aspiration. This meant Lauren was not breathing when her body entered the water. She did not drown. This single fact alone shattered the official narrative. Furthermore, Wasaki pointed to clear bruising and petechial hemorrhaging on the front of Lauren's neck, injuries an expert could associate with pressure or strangulation. There were also unexplained bruises on her thighs. Perhaps most striking was a very specific patterned injury on Lauren's stomach, a perfect reddish imprint of a triangle inside a larger triangle. To Wasaki and other law enforcement consultants she brought in, this mark was not from rocks or brush. It was a transfer pattern, the kind left when force is applied to a distinct object. They would soon argue this pattern was a direct match for the bow or front point of a standard aluminum canoe. The evidence was beginning to paint a different picture, not of a sleepy, clumsy fall, but of a physical confrontation. Meanwhile, the behavior of Lauren's friends after her death continued to raise alarms. None of them attended her funeral. Shortly after, Hannah and Aaron moved out of state to Florida, and from their new location, malicious online comments began to appear, attacking Lauren's character and spreading falsehoods about the night she died.
Sherry and her investigator tracked the digital footprints of these posts, and they led right back to the street where Hannah and Aaron were living. The pieces of a cover-up, not just an accident, were starting to come together. To break through the wall of silence from Hannah, Aaron, and Chris, Lauren's family took a dramatic legal step. In December 2016, Sherry and her husband Michael filed a $10 million wrongful death lawsuit against the three friends. This civil suit was not about sending them to jail. Its purpose was to use the legal discovery process to force them to answer questions under oath. It worked, but not in the way the family hoped. When Hannah Palmer, Aaron Lilly, and Chris Stout were deposed, one by one, they all invoked their Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. They refused to answer virtually every substantive question about that night. Their silence in a court of law spoke volumes. However, the lawsuit did compel the release of other critical evidence and testimony. The lead detective from the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office was deposed. Under oath, he admitted he had no prior experience investigating a homicide. He confirmed that no forensic rape kit was performed on Lauren's body, even though there were signs of potential sexual assault. He confirmed no DNA evidence was collected from under her fingernails, which could have revealed if she scratched an attacker. He confirmed her clothing was not forensically tested. He also admitted he never examined the canoe for evidence, never spoke to the man who found Lauren's body, and never interviewed people living on houseboats near the discovery site. The lawsuit also unveiled Lauren's own text messages from that final night. She had been texting a friend back home, a girl named Jade. In those messages, Lauren was not having fun. She asked Jade if she could come pick her up, saying, "They're being mean, I just want to come home." This directly contradicted the friend's portrayal of a happy, partying Lauren. It painted a picture of a young woman feeling trapped and wanting to escape the situation with her so-called friends. The civil suit peeled back the layers, revealing not a thorough police investigation, but a shockingly incomplete one that had accepted the friend's story at face value. Determined to challenge the core physical assumptions of the official story, the family and their private investigator turned to science and reconstruction. They needed to test the central claim that Lauren could have accidentally rolled out of the hammock, fallen down the cliff, and landed in the water. To do this, they conducted a series of physical tests at the actual site. They obtained a weighted mannequin matching Lauren's exact height and weight. Over several days, they performed more than 50 controlled drops from the precise edge of the cliff where the hammock was tied. The result was conclusive and repeated every single time. The mannequin never made it to the water. The thick, tangled brush and small trees covering the steep cliff face acted like a net. The dummy would fall a few feet, then become immediately snagged and entangled in the vegetation. It would hang there, suspended. Even when forced through the brush, it would catch again lower down. Furthermore, at the very bottom of the cliff, before the water, there was a several-foot-wide shelf of bare, jagged rock. For Lauren's body to have entered the lake, it would have needed to not only defy the brush, but also roll across this rocky shelf. The test drops proved this sequence of events was virtually impossible. In a separate investigation, the family hired an independent hydrologist, an expert in water movement. Using maps and data from that day, he analyzed the lake currents in Hog's Cove. His finding was definitive. If a body had entered the water at the base of that specific cliff, the natural current would have carried it northwest, out into the main channel of the lake and toward the busy marina. However, Lauren's body was found in the complete opposite direction. It was discovered in a quiet, isolated cove to the southeast. The hydrologists stated it was scientifically impossible for the lake's flow to have taken her body to that location from the campsite. This meant her body was placed in the water elsewhere, likely in or near that cove. Together, the cliff test and the hydrological analysis provided powerful, tangible proof that the official accident scenario could not have happened as described. The facts were now fighting the story. Today, the case of Lauren Agee remains in a painful and unresolved limbo. Officially, for the DeKalb County Sheriff's Department and the state of Tennessee, the matter is closed. The death certificate still reads accident. No criminal charges have ever been filed against Hannah Palmer, Aaron Lilly, or Chris Stout. They have never publicly explained the events of that night, the changing details in their stories, the social media post, or their decision to plead the Fifth Amendment. For them, the legal storm has passed. They have moved on with their lives. But for Lauren's mother, Sherry Smith, the fight for accountability continues every single day. The evidence gathered by the private investigator and the hydrological report all point to a stark conclusion. Lauren did not die from a simple drunken fall. The case is now a haunting example of an investigation that may have ended too quickly, accepting an easy answer over difficult questions. Sherry's mission has shifted from finding immediate justice to ensuring her daughter is not forgotten and that the glaring flaws in the system are exposed. She speaks about Lauren's story to raise awareness, hoping to prevent other families from experiencing the same hollow closure of a rushed ruling. The cliff at Hogg's Cove still stands overlooking the lake. The rope is still there for the climb. It is a quiet, beautiful place that holds a dark secret. The mystery of what truly happened in the early hours of July 26, 2015 persists. What do you guys really think happened? I would love to hear your opinions on the matter. Thank you for your time and support. I will be seeing you on our next episode.